is clear and clean and ready for the next stage. Okay. Speaking of the next stage, step 8 is lubricate and install your tappets and then your camshaft. So these are your valve tappets here. You got 2 of them. They're identical to each other. Hopefully you had them labeled in your cardboard of which one is the intake and which one the exhaust. If you didn't, you're just going to have to pick. Fortunately for our circumstances, it's not going to be that detrimental since these aren't engines with a lot of hours and they're not a customer engine, but normally we need to do a really good job of making sure stuff goes back exactly where they came from. So I'm going to put a little bit of lube here on the surface. There needs to be some on the stem because it's going to go up into the bore. And then ultimately we're going to want to put some in a little cup where the push rod's going to sit. Okay. The lower hole is your intake. And the upper is the exhaust. You don't want to push these in all the way because if you do, they have a tendency to get stuck and then they make installing your push rods and setting your lash a little bit tougher because you got to free them up or unbolt your crankcase cover and take them back out. Alright, so up next is the camshaft. Here's our camshaft. Before we put this in or lube it up, we do want to take a look at the compression release mechanism on it. Make sure that the spring is hooked up. Make sure that it is free to move and rotate and slide and perform as it needs to. We're going to put some red stuff on the main bearing and we're going to put yellow stuff on both of the lobes. So coating of red stuff and yellow stuff on the cam lobes. These cam lobes, these are high pressure lubrication points, so we want to make sure that we have really good lubrication on first start, which is why we use the yellow stuff. Okay? And then when I go to set this in place, I need to make sure that the timing mark on my crankshaft gear is pointing towards the center of the camshaft, and then I have a timing mark on my cam gear, and I need to make sure they line up. Because this is a bevel cut gear, they're going to look a little bit offset at first, but if I get them lined up, it will drop down and be directly across from each other like this. Okay? Now that I have camshaft installed, you would be ready for another checkpoint where I'll come over and I'll check to make sure that all your components are lubricated and in and your timing marks are lined up. After the checkpoint, we're going to want to go ahead and lubricate the portions of the crank and cam that we hadn't yet. So I'll do my PTO of both my crank and cam bearings. Put a little bit on the gears too. I'm going to want to make sure my crankcase cover gasket surface is clean and dry. If you have a gasket stuck to it, that's fine. If it's torn, see the gasket board for a replacement. If yours, in the case of mine, mine was stuck to the cover and it's in good shape. And also don't forget you have 2 dowels for alignment. They might be either both in your cover or both in your crankcase or one in each. Just make sure you got them and that they're not occupying the same hole so that everything's going to line up. This bearing is a fairly tight fit on the crankshaft, so it may not just drop straight down. We do want to be careful of the lip on this seal as well, so when we go to put this on, we want to line it up and carefully bring it down. It's probably going to get caught like this, and that's fine. What you don't want to do is hit it. Okay? It's just that close of a fit. You kind of have to push and wiggle a little bit to get it to line up and slide down, and you want to keep your fingers out from underneath because if this suddenly goes down, Last thing you want to do is smash your fingers in between two hard metal surfaces. Oop, there it goes. So we'll bring it down, line up all our holes, and it should just slide right into place. If for some reason it doesn't slide right down into place, we got to stop and look and check and see what's happening here. And at this point, I'm ready to drop in my 6 crankcase cover bolts. So I'm going to drop them into the holes. They're all the same length, so we don't have to really worry about location on this particular engine. Other engines, they might be different lengths, so you got to worry. The torque spec on these is going to be 80 to 90 inch-pounds. I'm going to go around and spin them all down and do them in a crisscross pattern, just like I will torque them once they're all the way down. Alright, so they're all spun down and snugged up, and they're ready to be torqued to 80 inch-pounds. So I'll bring my torque wrench over here. These are 8mm. So I got to change out my socket. And I'm going to tighten them in a crisscross pattern. Okay, torqued. So my crankcase cover is now torqued. I'm going to leave it like this. And we need to measure the crankshaft end play. To measure the crankshaft end play, dial indicator. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to set this onto the crankshaft and tighten it up. I'm going to rotate this so you guys can see it better. See that better? Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this all the way down. I'm going to rotate my dial so the 0 matches up with the needle. And then all I do is I pull on the crankshaft and I push it back. I pull, I push a couple of times, and I want to see how far that needle sweeps. In my case, the needle moved from 0 to 90 back to 0, which if each line is 1/1000th of an inch, that tells me that my crankshaft end play is 10/1000ths of an inch, which is fantastic because it's close to the lower side of things, but it's not too tight. Your spec on this is 3 to 30 thousandths. Okay. And that is the little bit of room the crankshaft needs as it grows longer as it heats up. Now that we're got that done, there's a checkpoint, and it's time to move on to the next step. And so that would be the end of step 13 would be your checkpoint, and then we move on to the back side of the first page.